Beirut, a city beaten down by war. Capital of a country still living on its nerves, fearful that the nightmares may not be over. TVI reports on the legacy of Lebanon's war among the youngest and most innocent of its people. Christmas comes to Lebanon at the end of a year when Christian values and Muslim values, the values of all faiths that respect life and love and human dignity, have been under siege. And in that siege, the most vulnerable victims have been children. Children who have an instinct for peace not yet realized, a longing for security not yet guaranteed. At the American University Hospital in Beirut, a Lebanese boy's arm and his future are being rebuilt. His hand was blown off by shrapnel in the shelling of West Beirut this summer.
اوكي هلا بس افتحها انت شو بتعمل؟ فوت ايدك جوا هون بدك تتزغزغ شيء؟
Despite his apprehension, this boy, compared with many others in West Beirut, is fortunate.
كيف علمتك هذيك اليوم؟ يلا 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 كمان 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 كمان.
There have been 1,800 amputations since the summer, and the waiting list for artificial limbs is 4 times greater than the numbers so far treated.
Okay.
The task of rebuilding human lives is matched in the streets of West Beirut by the reconstruction of a shattered city. It will take time, determination, and an estimated spending of more than $10 billion. But there are parts of the city which are far too dangerous for reconstruction to begin. In one of them, a French patrol, part of the multinational force now based in Beirut, embarks on a regular search for the hidden menace of live explosives. Close to a Palestinian refugee camp, that menace takes its toll. A young boy, playing with his friends, has detonated a grenade and suffered severe stomach injuries. The boy needs immediate surgery. He must be rushed to hospital. Escorted by a French military jeep, the car moves off. It arrives in time. The boy survives. The accident happened on the outskirts of 2 camps in Beirut, whose names, Sabra and Shatila, have become since mid-September a joint symbol of all that is most brutal and most shameful in human nature. Black flags are the only memorials for the uncounted dead who lie buried in mass graves. At least 800 Palestinians, men, women and children, were slaughtered here by Christian militiamen in 2 long days of terror. Terror piled on other terrors for the children of war. This boy was struck dumb. He has never spoken since.
They were in the shelter, and there was really a lot of shelling around. And when they went out of the shelter, all of a sudden he was screaming, and he lost his voice.
دغري بروح بتخبى تحت الدرج وين ما في مطرح بتخبى.
She said the only noise he can react to is the noise of the planes.
First few days of the first day of the massacre, the injuries were bullet wounds, long distance. Then on the second and third days, people began to come in with close-range bullet wounds, and in some cases fine shrapnel wounds from grenades, which had been thrown at them at very close range. And a lot of those were children and women.
What's the legacy of that now, in terms of what you have to deal with?
Well, now, of course, we have the physical injuries from the massacre. Many people paralyzed, many people who have partial paralysis, physical damage, major abdominal wounds, major head wounds, plus, of course, a tremendous amount of psychological damage. Every family has lost somebody. Every child has seen something or lost a relative, lost a brother or sister, mother or father.
Palestinian casualties would have been even worse without the refuge of the tunnels they had built beneath their camps. An Italian officer from the multinational force showed us one of them. Not just a refuge, but an underground society.
First level probably was used as a school. They have even a classroom, and as you see, all the publication, they are still around. And this is the only one habitant who is left here. The cat is always here. This is the end of this part of the tunnel, built as the fence. You can see from there, you can have a very good view of the road. This was maybe a position for automatic weapons. And on the roof, you can see the ventilation system of the tunnel. This is what is left.
Ventilation system throughout the whole tunnel?
Yes, the whole tunnels, at least in the part of the tunnels where they were living. This part of the tunnel has been born, maybe one explosion, and was store of ammunition.
It was the PFLP who built and organized this tunnel, and it was probably they themselves who blew up their remaining stocks of ammunition before they fled.
I believe that it was a big explosion.
Not far from the tunnel we were shown, at the edge of the Sabra and Shatila camps, Italian troops are now stationed. Across the road, under their protective scrutiny, the war-damaged Acca hospital is being rebuilt. At the beginning of December, the operating theatre was ready to begin work again, even as the rest of the hospital was still being fitted out. Outside the theatre, a 15-year-old Lebanese boy waiting his turn. He comes from the south, near Sidon, and he was injured 2 years ago in an earlier stage of the conflicts that have ravaged Lebanon on and off since the outbreak of civil war in 1975. Another Palestinian hospital half a mile away was the scene of the most recent intimidation. Lebanese troops moved in on Gaza Hospital one weekend and took away £350,000 worth of drugs from the medical store. Hospital staff then transferred the remaining supplies from the store to the greater security of the hospital itself. We asked a British volunteer doctor to describe what had happened.
Yesterday morning, round about 8 o'clock in the morning, it does seem that this officer really doesn't want us to film anymore.
I'm just talking to a doctor from the hospital. Je discute avec un médecin de l'hôpital.
It's not allowed to photography here.
Yes, I'm talking to a doctor from the hospital. That's what we're photographing.
I think your friend is photographing now.
Pardon?
Your friend behind you is photographing now.
Well, yes, I know, that's fine.
So we're talking to the doctor.
I know that you are talking to the doctor, but your friend behind you is photographing now, and it is not allowed.
Yes, but we're asking the doctor what happened, just the doctor.
Yes.
That's all we want to do.
Yes.
That's what we really came here to do.
So we have to go a little bit far away from here.
French soldiers from the multinational force then arrived, and the doctor explained the situation to their senior officer. The officer took no action. He had no authority to do so. But his presence lowered the temperature between the Lebanese troops and ourselves and made it possible for the doctor to continue his story.
But this morning I was on duty at the hospital. At 8 o'clock I was called and told that the soldiers had returned. I was the only doctor around at the time, and I went down to the store, and there were 3 unmarked army trucks and about 20 to 25 soldiers, this time armed. It was notable yesterday they were not armed, this morning they were armed. They were already in the process of loading up one truck with hospital equipment. I tried to speak to them, but they pleaded ignorance of both French and English, and eventually I gave them a note for their officer who was down in the store. The note came back with regrets that he was too busy to speak to me and would I please go away. So at that stage I went away and went down to see the International Red Cross. When we come back to the hospital about an hour later, the trucks had gone. They'd apparently loaded up again three truckloads of drugs and medical equipment. And now the Lebanese army have come back in force onto the scene, and the whole thing is in a bit of confusion. As far as we are concerned, 2 more visits like this to the hospital store would put an end to us functioning as a surgical and accident hospital.
Confusion in Beirut is part of a dangerous national confusion. In the north and east, Syrian forces with the remaining PLO are in control. Immediately north of the capital, the Kataib, the Christian Phalange militia. Southward, much of the country is still occupied by the Israelis and their most favored Lebanese allies, the forces of Major Haddad, with United Nations peacekeeping troops close to the border with Israel. South Lebanon, biblical territory, a region racked by years of conflict between Israel and the PLO. Near here, in the town of Cana, Christ worked his first miracle, changing water into wine. Today, peace is the miracle the United Nations is working for. Here, UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, has helped to build, with peace in mind, a new school in a mountain village. But suddenly, a sonic boom cracks overhead on the morning that the new school opens. Dutch troops at the UN checkpoint believe it to be a dogfight between Israeli and Syrian jets. It may be just an exercise. No one can be sure. And no one can be sure that the school these Lebanese children and their parents have long been waiting for will have time to grow and develop as its pupils grow. In recent years, schools, homes, hospitals have been rebuilt in South Lebanon, only to be destroyed again. But in the view of a UNICEF officer, to wait for certainty would be to wait forever.
Yeah, what we are planning on now is to have a $60 million reconstruction program in the war-affected areas of Lebanon. I would say, first of all, it's not going to meet the needs. It is probably more to say that the target has been what we can cope with in 2 years. So the time to implement this program is 2 years. But what we hope for is that we would work side by side with many others in assisting the government of Lebanon to reconstruct the country in the sectors we are involved in.
What are the chances of achieving in a country which is still not at peace, where there is still fighting, where there is still bloodshed, where there is still danger?
I have happened to work here since 1976, and I think that there are certain issues that cannot wait. I think that if one don't want people to leave an area completely, to give up whatever they need of water, education, health services, which we are involved in, one cannot really do that. I mean, it is undoubtedly a risk one takes. But I think one has to risk this money. Therefore, if one haven't done it, people could simply not live in the area. And these children need, as I said, water, education, they need health services and so on. So in a way, even if it is a pity, it is terrible to start all over again, one has to do it.
For those who live in Palestinian refugee camps like Ain el-Helwe near the town of Sidon, to start again is heartbreak. Not enough time to build new homes from the rubble of war before the worst of winter hits them. Not enough supplies with which to build. And there is fear in the camp too. Fear of the Israeli army which watches over them. For Ain el-Helwe is inhabited in the main by children and women and old men. The young men have been killed or have fled or have been arrested and kept in detention by the Israelis. Outside Israeli army headquarters in Sidon, Palestinian relatives wait each day for the bus from Ansar, the prison camp where 6,000 men are being held. If any are to be released, they will be on this bus. On this day, there were none, just Israeli troops. As their spokesman made clear, the Israelis' first concern is security.
Well, there's no doubt that a war, no matter what part of the war you look into it, does bring quite a lot of distress and quite a lot of strain. And it does cause social problems as well. The reason for those people being detained at the moment is mostly, it's practically only a security reason. In some cases, we find out that the information that we had was not very accurate, and we are trying to release those people as fast as possible. It is, by all means, it is a little bit of a unusual and an unnatural way for the children to go without their parents, without their fathers. In most cases, we're talking about the men only. But unless we make it very sure that there will not be a security hazard for the state of Israel, then we'll still keep them for the time being.
In Lebanon's recent history, no army and no people have a monopoly of guilt or innocence. 6 years ago, in what is now the ghost town of Damour, Palestinians massacred over 500 Christians. The Christians fled, and Damour became a fortress for the Palestinians until they in turn were bombarded and driven out by the Israelis in the summer. And still today, in the nearby region of the Shuf, Christian and Muslim factions are involved in frequent clashes. More conflict, more killing, more fatherless children. While armies and politicians try to decide their future, a choir of orphan children rehearse in Arabic an international Christmas song.